Hello, welcome to our panel on shifting the culture from cybersecurity to cyber resilience. We have a great panel here that will discuss this topic from various perspectives. My name is Thomas Ludwig. I'm Vice President of Customer Advocacy at MetricStream, and I'm working with our customers on exactly these topics. Our panel consists of three different perspectives. We have Olivera Zatezalo, who's Chief Security Officer with Huawei Canada, so she represents the perspective of an equipment vendor. So she's concerned not only about the security of her own organization, but the security of all their customers. Our second panelist is Pedro de Sousa Avelino. He's Chief Technology Officer and Operations Officer at NNN. So he is representing a highly regulated industry, the insurance business, and his perspective as a chief technology officer that his portfolio includes security, so he has a broader view on how security is embedded in the overall technology and operations. And our third panelist is Jane Harper. She is Senior Director of Information Security, Risk and Business Engagement at Eli Lilly. So she's representing one of the leading pharmaceutical companies. I thank you so much for joining our panel, and I would ask you to briefly start out with sharing your perspective on the topic of the cultural shift to cyber resilience. Olivera, can you please tell us how you see it from your perspective, from the perspective of an equipment vendor?
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So from the vendor perspective, we are here to help our customers, operator of the critical structure, build resilient network. So in order to build resilient network, it's very important to start from the very beginning, from the design of the network, to build that resilience and monitoring of the network in the real time. So Huawei uses NIST standard. We use IPDRR standard to help our customers build resilient network. IPDRR stands for identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And with that in mind, we are following the NIST cybersecurity framework to guide our customers how to build resiliency from the very beginning, from the design of the network. Also, as a vendor provider, we try our best to build all the features necessary in our equipment so that they support this resilience from the very beginning, from the design of the network. So when we decide our equipment, we basically first make sure that all our equipment supports monitoring and system traceability. All our equipment supports secure boot. So in the scenario when you have to reboot your network, you actually have the confidence that it's going to come in a secure fashion. And also we provide a high security solution, which is using artificial intelligence to support end-to-end cyber resilience, covering security management, threat detection, analysis, response, and recovery.
Thank you, Olivera. Pedro, obviously your perspective working as a chief technology officer for an insurance company is very different.
Yeah, indeed, Thomas. Thank you for not only for moderating this panel, but also for Olivera for kicking it off. Good morning for Americas, good afternoon for Europe. I'm based in Hungary. And indeed, Nationale Nederlanden, it's a life insurance group present in a pan-European context where we have it from Spain to Japan, having several business units, and majority we are a life insurance provider, as a product provider, and also through our intermediaries. So as you said, you quite rightly said that looking at from a different angle, I think that it goes beyond your physical and your network perimeter and how you design your security as a whole, but also my weakest link of the chain. If it goes with scale, if it goes with my agents and intermediaries on the field, it is the human factor. And the human factor will always be the weakest link when having an approach that we'll have to try to meet as a sandwich of having the board acknowledging and understanding the importance of you making a certain investment, because it's very rare that they clearly understand how it translates to business benefits, and only when something happened that we have a reaction instead of prevention. And with this, it should be also bottom up from the overall organization with awareness and with proper understanding of how important it is for them to be properly trained, properly educated, and preventing that from all angles that the cybersecurity would become not only a threat to them, to the IP of the organization, but also for becoming cyber resilient. So with this, engaging on a sandwich approach, having your board acknowledge as part of my remit to also educate, and having my peers as board members to understand how this can happen, and also making sure that through business security officers, CISOs and chief information security officers, they're able to educate the organization from a bottom-up approach, and this makes a better concealed way of delivering services to our intermediaries with 1,200 agents on the field, where we provide all the services that they need and have to provide life insurance services and other products for our final customers. So all of this goes a little bit beyond for me than just having a proper security design and your proper appliances in place, but they are all complementary, and needless to say. So with this, if I think about it as a last note, is that combining the efforts of personnel, staff, higher and senior management, distributing the tools in the proper ways of you to ring fence your perimeter and allowing you to become resilient is the way to go.
Thank you, Pedro, for that perspective. Jane, in the pharmaceutical industry, and I think also in the specific situation where so much focus on the healthcare sector, how do you see cyber resilience?
So thank you, Thomas, and you've shared my title. I want to add just a little bit of context so that you all understand my perspective. What I do is lead a team of professionals that partner with technology and business leaders to help them better understand how they perceive and manage information security risk. Now, I started my career in enterprise risk management, working from an operational risk perspective, and later added technology and security. So I typically see these things from a different perspective. I also just have to add that the opinions expressed here are my professional and personal opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Eli Lilly and Company. So when we talk about this resiliency, I want to start with a story. I want everybody to think back to the beginning of this year. We went from constantly checking and reporting everything from vulnerability rates to our in-house phishing campaign click rates to constantly checking COVID-19 rates pretty much overnight. We saw an increase in the number and types of scams and they leveraged the pandemic because people were already concerned and panicking. So as a technology or security leader or risk leader, I want you to imagine you have people sitting at their desks surrounded by misinformation. They're not sure how COVID is spread. They're not sure where it really came from, just a lot of unknowns. What they believe they know for whatever reason is that they need more toilet paper and that alcohol and masks are necessary. What people know for sure is that people are sick and people are dying. The right email on the wrong day advertising things like alcohol and masks, or just to look at the infection rate map, people are bound to click. So when we talk about how do we shift to be more cyber resilient within an organization, it starts with good security hygiene, making sure you have the appropriate support at the executive level and that you have the right talent in place to help you. After that, it comes down to leveraging people, process, and technology. It's got to be a layered approach. So when we talk about some of the basic blocking and tackling for every organization, we're thinking about things like governance from a policy and procedure perspective, making sure that you're doing the appropriate amount of information security education and development. We have to raise it up a level beyond just training and awareness. We have to leverage our monitoring and detection and reporting tools. We've got to make sure we're doing good hygiene with patching, configuration, and change management. But because people are our strongest and our weakest link, corrective actions and sanctions cannot be replaced. You have to have those measures in place. And back to the basics, a good disaster recovery and BCP, business continuity plan, is key with the threat landscape as it is today. And they are not the same. So those are just some of the things that you need to consider when we're talking about shifting to a more resilient cyber approach.
Thank you very much. I think you gave an excellent description of the situation. And I think you also basically named the key elements of what resilience is. in the very beginning, Olivera, you had mentioned this cybersecurity framework. If we look at that, the 5 top functions there are identifying risk, protecting against risk, which is classical cybersecurity, but the other 3 are resilience. They are detecting that you are under attack, responding to an attack, and recovering from an attack. I think Olivera just gave us a very good example how I think most of us felt at the beginning of the year. How did you actually see that from your perspective in the beginning of the year? Is there anything that changed for an equipment vendor?
You mean since the pandemic started?
Yes, specifically, is there anything that were situations of recovery, situations of response that you could specifically see?
So
So
I think it's
what
very
was different
important to say.
here than the
Yeah.
year before?
Yeah, so I think it's very important to say that we all, now that we are staying home and using the internet, the connectivity, not just to work, but for entertainment, to connection with the family, we all rely on a network. So we as the vendors, we were here to help our customers, our carrier, make sure that a network is available all the time. So we worked with them at the beginning of pandemic to support them to do performance management of the network, to make sure that network is available. So I think our focus in the beginning was just to be there to support them. I don't believe that we've seen any specific issue related to pandemic. From the vendor perspective, we just continue being there for our customers, supporting them, and helping them in case they come across a vulnerability they didn't see before. But I don't have any specific examples. I think we are just here to help them and using the best practices in like deploying the equipment and fixing the issues they find in the production in a timely fashion.
Thank you, Olivera. Pedro, I would also like to ask you how specifically you saw the topics of response to the specific situations earlier this year, how to recover from it. I think Olivera just said, obviously, network capacity was a big problem in the beginning. What were specific problems that you faced, and how do you think, what do you think did we learn in that specific situation?
I love the question, and I'll complement it with what Jane said. So thank you, Thomas. Interesting, because it was exactly the same. Being an organization that was, so our network connections, a point in case, just to exemplify, our network connections, our local VPNs were connected through Netherlands to our group, and through the group, it reached out through Hungary. And therefore, what happened was that the bandwidth to connect all the other entities and all the entities as business units through the organization, going through the Netherlands, of course, we reached the maximum throughput of the organization. And what happened is that, why I said that I love what Jane said, is because it was precisely because of our business continuity plan and our disaster recovery plans that we are able to get our DR sites in place. So making sure, and we luckily are able to test it properly, and we are ensuring, being an insurance company, is that we quantify risk very well. So we try to measure risk and quantify it accordingly. So having this point in case where we had to, well, we worked in shifts, if you believe it. So we worked in shifts, managing to get from 7 until 3 o'clock, a certain group of people could work, from 12 until 8 o'clock, another group of people, and in the interval throughout lunch, we had to break it down to not access key crucial internet systems because there was no throughput available for the users. So with this shifting out, so instead of going through this VPN through the group, we managed to shift it to our disaster recovery plan, and managing to get exactly from what Jane said. She came from operational risk management, and we have the same from a risk and enterprise risk management perspective. We do go through all the processes of having BCP, DR tests, DR sites. The learnings and the key learnings that we had was that those tests that we never managed to put it in place for real, and they never ran it, and they never had a real use case apart from having the formalization of a policy, is that it proved more than worth it for you to try to get your own business resilience to get it across and maintaining business continuity. And we had regulatory, as you said, starting and going on the other way around, having a national bank taking a look at it. If you're not able to reply your customers from a contact center, for example, up to 15 minutes, you'll be fined. If you have a personal client service, meaning an agency where the customer should go in, if your systems are stopped there, you will get fined. So all the complaints that you'll get this from a regulatory body that if you're not able to be resilient in this sense, specifically not from a cyber attack, but from a resilient software organization, you would have severe consequences in your political context, because there is well, the branding image and the public relations that it can cause as an issue for you, it can be very severe. So key learnings is having disaster recovery and business security plan is not something that you get as a policy and procedure just to tick a box, but something that it's of crucial and summary importance for you to understand how you enable people, process, and technology to deliver this to your customers in such a delicate cases of their lives, because we are dealing also with claims related to COVID, be it hospitalization or even death claims. So imagine not being able to fulfill those. Those are very severe consequences for not only the organization, but also in the economic and political context.
Excellent point, Pedro. I think you basically laid it out for us. In some sense, we all went through a huge disaster recovery exercise earlier this year. And many things, that used to be on paper. Oh, what do we do if we cannot go to the office? How do we actually follow plan A, B, C? That became very real very quickly. In this context, Jane, a question to you. You had laid out actually in a very eloquent way how this all was put in context earlier this year. The question to you is on the focus on culture. This is the title for our panel. Do you think because of this big COVID disaster recovery exercise, the culture has changed forever? Was it actually, in some sense, good as a resilience training? And what do you expect for the future?
So that is an excellent question. So some of the culture really has to do with what industry you're in. So while I have spent a good portion of my career in healthcare, I've also spent a significant portion of my career in financial services. And when you are an international financial services conglomerate, concepts like working remotely or managing international teams remotely is not new. So I do think for many organizations that it will definitely be a permanent culture change. I think we will start to see more investment in the ability for people to work from home, because when we're honest with ourselves, we don't know what or when the next COVID might happen. And we need to be able to offer that flexibility to ensure our operations, especially when I think about the mission of Lilly as we combine, science and care and discovery to make medicines for people all over the world.
Thank you for that point, and I think you gave us an excellent keyword. And Olivera, I would like to basically switch to you. Jane just said investment. I think without a doubt, many investments in having better resilience will happen. Do you already see that as an equipment vendor? Simple things like more need for network capacity, or maybe more complex things around security. Is that happening right now? Or are you hoping that it will happen?
It definitely happens. And from the Huawei perspective, I have to say that security is always our top priority. It's actually in our DNA. We never had an issue getting a budget approved to do any security improvements on our products or in our process. Huawei is a process-based organization. We have security processes implemented throughout everything we do. And we do invest on a regular basis to improve product development, as well to educate the people, our employees. Like when it comes to security, I personally train my people on an ongoing basis, and 2 times a year we do have a test. We certify them and make sure they're actually on the top of their game when it comes to cybersecurity. I would also like to point that Huawei made a commitment to make significant investment in 2018 to improve the security development and the life cycle of all Huawei legacy products. We made a commitment to invest $2 billion over the next 5 years on that, and on an ongoing basis, we are actually doing that across the globe. I just want to remind everybody that Huawei works in 170 countries. We comply with local laws and regulation in each and every country we work. We also make significant investment in opening security and transparency center to invite not just our customers, but to invite governments to come and see our products from the inside out. How do we design them, and also the features that we are building. So last year we opened a very important security and transparency center in Brussels. There is a center in Bonn. We do have a security testing lab in UK since 2010 and in Canada since 2013. So across the globe, 7 security and transparency centers. So as I said at the beginning, cybersecurity is our top priority, and we continue to make significant investment to improve security of our products.
Thank you, Olivera. I think investments are a key aspect of this cultural shift, but there are many soft factors. And I think, Pedro, you are in an organization that is distributed by nature, and I think the insurance industry typically always has been. If we talk about the soft factors, what do you see as essential to building resilience into the culture? We all know it's difficult to change people. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, being a financial services not necessarily means that we are the front runners, but I call it specifically on insurance sector is we are the underdogs. So we are laggards behind regular and traditional challenging banks and now banks and banks that already went through digital transformations. And with this, their understanding of the importance of not only the investments and how this translates inside the organization, it comes, Jane said this before as well, your top management and your board, understanding that it's not a debate and a discussion that you have to beg for investments, whereas Olivera is within a division that already guarantees investment and understand the importance of it. Here is an education. And education is the key priority of building this up from the ground up. And building this up from, as we said, the weakest link for at least from my chain, having people in data leak prevention and prevention and having the people aware of it. But when they understand that a certain decision has to be made, be it a choice of a business investment and B, becoming more cyber resilient, how do we go about this? So this will only be disrupted by understanding properly where we are in, where Jane said, where the next COVID will hit. So getting it, looking in advance, looking how your security incident and event management will look ahead and preparing yourself for this, for the debates that will happen inside the organization, that they should not be so questionable to understand if this is an investment that is worth doing it or not. So the learning and the power of repetition, the education of your own organization throughout all levels of them is, for me, the key factor that will make or break your future resilience as well.
Thank you, Pedro. I think you made an excellent point. With this great and I think very important experience of COVID behind us, there's a certain risk that we all fall into hindsight bias and that we only think about this aspect. Jane, a question for you would be, obviously what happened with COVID is very important, but how do you think, can we think forward to not just stuck in this one experience and to have a more systematic view, maybe also applying your experiences from operational risk management? How do you think can we make sure that we don't fight last year's war next year?
So I'm going to tell you that 99% of my answers to all things in life is a risk management. I am a true risk management biased person. So when I think about risk management, I can talk a little bit about some of the things that we were able to do. As you all know, we are a global organization. And so we were able to use risk-based approaches to prioritize and decision quickly. So we were having really key discussions and making decisions about our people first, because we needed our people to be safe. So when we talk about prioritization and justification, again, just using a risk-based approach. We were able to quickly transition and start assessing our technology and current state for security. And then we had to switch gears, or what we call pivot, and start talking about supply chain and analyzing those supply chain risks. As we looked at those, we saw some opportunities around some processes that our suppliers use to provide staff with systems all over the world. And so we were able to pivot and step in and provide support to some of those suppliers to make sure that people had the assets that they needed to work from home. But when we talk about risk management, it really is making sure that we take the principles from 100-year-old discipline. Risk management for over 100 years has been enabling and protecting organizations. Being able to take that risk management expertise and embed it into the security and technology and operational processes is key. It's what's going to allow you to assess and move quickly as you consistently identify, analyze, prioritize, treat, monitor, and report over and over again so you are prepared for whatever the next COVID may be. And it's going to include issues and risks from a broad spectrum, because we're not just an international network. We're an international economy. We have international people. So those risk management principles are key.
Excellent, Jane. Thank you so much. And we're actually approaching our time limit. And Jane, you already gave us an excellent closing statement. I would actually like to ask you, Olivera, also for your closing statement. There's one question actually that came up from the audience, and that was, what are the top recommendations to achieve cyber resilience in today's interconnected world? So basically, we're being asked to summarize it, to bring it down to the top recommendations. I think Jane just gave us a very good summary. What is your summary? What are the maybe top three or the top three lessons that you would give our audience for cyber resilience?
That's an excellent question. Thank you for it. So I think my number one recommendation is partnership. Like, this is not a single company issue. We have to understand the complexity of the current cybersecurity landscape. We have to partner with the standard bodies, with vendor equipment, with operators and the government to make sure we build all these into our requirements when we build resilience network. My second recommendation is to actually look at how sophisticated these attacks are becoming. Very often we do see artificial intelligence being used to attack our networks. So it's essential that we turn to these complex algorithms when we build resilience, that we start implementing artificial intelligence to do our cybersecurity situational awareness, to collect all this data from the network and to actually come up with a threat analysis, detection analysis, response and recovery. So I think my recommendation would be to partner with the end vendors and industry to start looking for the solution to implement artificial intelligence to help us build cyber resilience through cybersecurity situational awareness.
Okay, thank you so much. And we only have less than 2 minutes left. Pedro, I would like to actually ask you for the final closing statement here. And I think there were two things coming from both Jane and from Olivera, and that is focus on supply chain, focus on partners. And I think that fits very nicely also with, for instance, what is a key part of the tiering in the NIST cybersecurity framework, where the question is, are you talking to your vendors? Are you consuming information from your vendors? Are you providing information to your vendors? And also in the other direction of the supply chain, are you receiving information about from your customers, and are you sharing it with your customers? And I believe we all know that much more has to happen there. This has to be improved. But in this context, the question to you, Pedro, what is the top topic of cyber resilience in your mind?
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. So being educated and educating, so receiving this from vendors or from the group itself. So I have a group that supports me, and I moved from local security standard event management and threat response from my local capacity and capabilities to what I have as a center of excellence that is delivering for me. So understanding how this evolves, staying on top of the curve, absorbing this to not be being a partner also with your whole change agenda. That is, this should not be a blocker, but it should be an enabler to give you the guardrails to enable the acceleration and the quick speed and delivery to market that your organization needs, but also keeping into your policy and procedures and embedding this that will enable the organization to grow sustainably and resilient. So with this, I think that it shouldn't be a blocker. It shouldn't be something that you put it as a guardrail, as a firewall for your whole organization to compel with, but becoming a partnership, receiving this information, transparently sharing with your intermediaries and final customers, and making sure that this is a flow that will happen organically.
Thank you so much, Pedro. I think the whole panel so much. I think you really shared these different perspectives. Thank you also to our audience for staying with us, and I hope you have a great rest of your summit. Thank you so much. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to the audience.